All right, kids, you know what time it is. That's right. Okay, it's not Lego Wizard time, although that's a problem. That is a problem, and I need to get back to it. It is time to go behind the scenes once again, and I just did a behind-the-scenes shoot earlier this week, last week, the week before this week, or something like that. I just did this shoot, and I did it using a very tried and true system here, which is my iPhone and this lovely rig system. It's a very nice, I've gotten lots of compliments. It's a very nice wood grip handle, metal frame, not great in the cold. The frame gets very cold. A little standard metal mount, but all these great hot shoe mounts and stuff like that. It's a handy dandy little mount, and then this awesome lanyard loop that I've attached to it. This is phenomenal for run and gun shooting because sometimes you want to just work at the speed of creativity and get your shots and get it done. And this is what's so great about the iPhone. This is the iPhone 11 Pro, and what I thought was so great about this particular shoot was that it is a real-world example of what shooting with the iPhone looks like. I'm actually starting this little edit, this little preview, with the iPhone falling apart. So basically, where the iPhone falls apart, low light situations. And again, I'm a big fan of running and gunning, just making this thing work at the speed of creativity, which is also why I'm editing in Final Cut Pro. It works at what I like to call the speed of creativity. Once you understand basics, the technology gets out of your way. I'm a fan of cameras, I'm a fan of technology, but at the same time, I'm also a fan of creating whatever that project is. And I want to just create it and get it done. So, what's cool about the iPhone, you've got an entire supercomputer behind those camera lenses processing your video. Now, in terms of video, the iPhone is incomparable. It is one of the best video cameras out there. I have a big old Canon video camera. It's this $2,000 camera. And if there is an option, if I can use the iPhone, I use the iPhone. And there have actually been instances where the iPhone vastly outperforms the Canon video camera. But this first shot here is really fascinating because this is where the iPhone falls apart. Play this really quickly, and you can see the low light. There's the stabilization that's going on. You can see, like, if you look over here in this corner, in this section over here, you can see that it's getting all super. It's super grainy. And the quality of the image. Like, look at the guy's beard. Like, it's all falling apart. Now, this is the same camera that's shooting everything else. So let's just play a little bit, and I will show you what I'm talking about. First clip here, where the camera completely falls apart, and then what else we get into. Alright, I'm going to stop it there because that's the first segment in this behind-the-scenes footage thing. And again, the project that I was shooting was literally a behind-the-scenes video for a commercial. Shooting in Orlando. This first location was Lake Eola. If you are in Orlando or from Orlando or have been to Orlando, you might recognize the fountain and the skyline and blah, 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 blah. So, some interesting things here. Let's take a look at this. Let me zoom in on my timeline. Give you a better... Okay, point of note, music is called Dreamers on the Run by Caleb Etheridge. Technical, this is a 1080 timeline at 24 frames per second. but everything was shot at 4K 60 frames per second, except for what I point out as we watch this. So let me mute this audio. I'm shooting at 60 frames per second so that I can natively slow it down, get a little bit of native high-quality slow motion without losing the quality in the picture. So that's what you're seeing in this first shot. There is a little bit of stabilization happening, but for the most part, and again, iPhone, 4K 60, handheld. Everything is handheld. Everything you are going to see in this video is completely handheld. So a smidge of stabilization on this shot just to clean up a little bit of shakiness in the, as I was stepping back, pulling back. This shot here is really cool because I switched over to the super wide angle lens. This is an example of where that iPhone wide angle lens is really going to shine. A lot of great light, a lot of great natural light, great wide expanse to show the bandstand and that skyline, get it all in this great panning shot to establish it. I assembled this edit just to be cute. I wanted to have something to kind of like look at and dig into this iPhone footage. But there was something interesting. I did very little color correcting. There's a little bit of correction on some of these early shots, but this sequence right here, these three shots, this first opening shot, the statue shot with the reveal of the boat, and then this one, they were shot at different times of the morning, and obviously two shots were, shot towards the sun, and then this one is obviously not. This shot, I did actually tweak the colors a little bit. I was talking about it earlier today, and I thought, I think this was pretty natural. I think the blue cast on this particular shot is pretty natural as to what the scene looked like during that day. But when that was cut between these two very orange yellowish shots, it was a bit jarring when you play that cut. So I did actually tweak the color on this shot, and when you look at it by itself, it's a little on the yellow side and probably a little unnatural. But I think it makes that cut a little bit simpler. It smooths out the color transition from one shot to the other. And just to show you, if you've never done color correction, or if you've never played with the color correction in Final Cut, it was really, really simple. Usually the first things I do is tweak the exposure. In this particular case, I'm matching it aesthetically from one shot to the other to make that color transition a little less jarring. But the big thing was the actual color. So I did boost the saturation a little bit just to dial it up to, let's see, what was that, 38. And then it was this color board right here. And this honestly, it took me a very long time to figure this out. Once I figured it out, it's like, oh, this solves a lot of my color correcting problems. Usually if you're shooting very yellow, or there's a yellow light that you're shooting with, all of your footage looks yellow. In this footage right here, it's going to be very green. I'm going to tweak the green color a little bit. So basically, this line here, there's everything underneath is negative, everything above is positive. If there's too much of a color, you bring one of the nodes, the master, the shadow, the midtones, the highlights, wherever that color is most dominant, and you subtract the color. So in this case, the shot had a blue cast, and I wanted to make it a little bit more yellow to match the surrounding shots. So I took that the master node, and just subtracted a little bit of that, subtracted a little bit of that blue. If a shot is too yellow, you can bring that yellow down, or the other way would be to kind of like push that yellow up, and that would add, obviously, a little bit more yellow to the shot. Other than that, those are the big aesthetic changes I've made to these shots. Everything else is mostly native out of the camera, aside from changing the speed of the shots. And I wanted to show you, I think I've talked about it before, but I'll show it to you real quickly again. So if I come over to the timing menu, I'm going to pull up custom, and right here you'll see that it was slow. I adjusted it to about 60%. So first we'll set it to normal, which is 100%, and you can see what it looks like when it plays back at a normal speed. But that's about what it looks like. And then, because it was shot at 4K 60, and this is a 24 frames per second timeline, if you go into your timing menu and click automatic speed, that's going to set it to the native frames per second. It's going to play back at the native frames per second for this timeline, which should create like that native slow motion versus the artificial slow motion of taking a 24 frames per second video or clip, shortening it by 50%, extending it by 50%, turning it into a 12 per second frames per second clip, which would then create that really weird stuttery look. Love all of the glass on these iPhones, all the large glass on the front of the iPhone lenses these days with these last few generations. So this shot over here, one, it's a good establishing shot for the very end of the video to say where we are. But this is really cool. This is me walking up to the sign. Again, completely handheld. Everything here, completely handheld, just walking up to it. That's the stabilization in the iPhone. This is the iPhone 11 Pro. Same exact feature set of the iPhone 11. If you know what you're doing, if you have that steady hand, if you have that steady gait, you can't just like, oh, it's going to give you cinematic results. But if you manipulate the camera in a cinematic way, this is all you need. It's phenomenal. It's great. Who needs stabilizers when you have an iPhone? All right, let's keep watching this video and see what other surprises we have in store. Great establishing shot. At Universal Studios, Islands of Adventure. This shot here, baby. Oh my God, these two shots. This is what we're talking about with Apple's Extreme Dynamic Range feature. Again, this is a crazy feature that's on both the iPhone 11, iPhone 11 Pro. And basically what it's doing is, as it's shooting 4K 60, it is interlacing the video. It's actually shooting 120 frames per second, and it's interlacing a high exposure and a low exposure together. And what that means is you get a shot like this, where you have deep blacks and bright exposed shots over here, and everything is playing back so smoothly. You look at this in comparison, let me mute this audio track, to this video here. The bad exposure, it's just the camera just doesn't know what it's focusing on and how to process that image. Come back over here. This is at the Hulk loading, the Hulk roller coaster. The contrast, the blacks, everything about these shots is just phenomenal, coming out of an iPhone, a cell phone, a smartphone. This is incredible. This is just a great video camera. The only thing that I did here, aside from trying to keep that shot as steady as possible, smooth as possible, because what happens in the low light situations, these stabilizers are going to start tweaking and trying to compensate for every little motion. So the lower the light quality, the more that distortion of the stabilizer comes into play. So you want to keep that motion as smooth and crisp as possible. The other trick to these shots, again, no other equipment, just the iPhone, just the handheld, just the grip. There is no gear, there are no lenses, native iPhone shot. Lock the exposure and autofocus and underexpose the shot. So I just lock the shot, or I lock the focus on the screen here, and I drop the exposure. that helps keep that all of the grain in check, and that way that extreme dynamic range performance, that interlacing picture, is going to perform to the best of its abilities. That also helps when you're doing something like this, where we're playing back in slow motion. That reveal, creating a shot that reveals the focus or the main subject. Lock your focus before you start moving the camera, before you start moving something in front of the camera. So the camera doesn't have to hunt and search for what it is that you're trying to focus on. And again, like this shot here, another just that secondary example of how well, when done right, again, this shot over here was not done right. This shot over here, holy cow, that is phenomenal performance, phenomenal low light performance. All right, let's keep watching. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, dinosaurs. Gee, where did those come from? I actually don't have much to say about these dinosaur shots other than it's dinosaurs, and I really, is it a video by Krumbine if there are no dinosaurs? And I would argue, no, probably not. We're starting somewhere, and then boom, the kid's being attacked by a velociraptor. That whole shot tells a story, both with its movement, with what's happening on camera, the actor, the dinosaur. The whole shot tells a really fun story. Although this is a good example of where, the camera and the exposure doesn't work in your favor, but everything's happening so quickly. Like, yeah, it's cool. It's not that big of a deal. This was that other example of what we just talked about, locking your exposure and focus on your subject before you start moving the camera. That way your foreground stays blurry. The camera isn't trying to pick up the wrong focus. Okay, so I'm going to drop in the actual fully rendered version of those two shots so you can properly see the difference. But this first shot here, this is proper 4K 60. And you can see it slowed down, like we've already talked about, 4K or 60 frames per second in a 24 frame per second timeline. Handheld, I'm just slowly pushing in. I'm kind of rocking my body back and forth, kind of to create that push-in moment. So this was shot with like the full quality video, and then this shot was done with the proper slow motion mode, the 240 frames per second, and you can see the like insane drop in quality, because once you switch over to slow motion on the iPhone, you're dropping the smart HDR, you're dropping the extreme dynamic range in exchange for 240 frames per second. That's buttery smooth slow motion, and this footage is not even slowed down as much as it could be. But you'll see, like, you look at the dark sections of the video, and you can look at where the shadows are, and then compare that over in the actual slow motion footage, and you can see where the quality just drops. Never mind the fact that it's actually 4K footage versus, I'm not entirely sure. It's the Apple's 240 frames per second is either 1080 or 720p, but you can absolutely see the huge drop in quality. The other thing is, once you do start shooting that fast, watch these lights over here. You start seeing weird electrical flickers, so you do start picking up some other weird things happening when you're shooting in extreme slow motion. And then real quickly, like, let's go to the timing and let's set to automatic speed, and this is what it looks like at the actual 240 frames per second inside a 24 frames per second timeline. And of course, like, that's the trade-off we're talking about here. You get that buttery smooth slow motion. Had I been shooting from the other end of the pool, those lighting conditions would have been considerably better. The quality would have been better. But because I was shooting in from some sharp shadows, didn't work so well. Also that zoom lens, so, problems were there. Problems were to be had. Okay, let's wrap this up. I've got 2 shots here. We're going to watch these 2 shots and then the outro of the video. Let's see what we got. Okay, so these 2 shots were really just another example of that great low light performance when the camera is set up correctly. Again, really dark blacks, solid blacks, not a lot of grain. I think I'm looking for it and I don't see it. And then this shot here just plays so perfectly. And then here's our outro, finishing up on a really ridiculous swing. This shot here, the only reason I left this in, because it's not behind the scenes. It doesn't really show any technique. But it's like that Lake Eola sign shot. It's a wider shot. It's a sharp angle up. And I'm literally just walking forward to get this really cool zoom. And look how beautifully stable this is. It's ridiculous. No gimbal, just walking. Another beautiful reveal shot. And then I was struggling with this drone all day. And boy, I nailed this shot. I was so happy with the framing of this shot. I'm like, finally, I got the drone crossing the path like that. There's absolutely nothing artistic about this. It was just really fun timing, and I can be happy with myself for a minute there, can I? If you have any questions about anything you've seen in this video, technique, tools, or style, or anything, leave a question. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Stay creative.